The doctor's hands were shaking. I noticed it right away, the slight tremor in her fingers as she scrolled through my test results on the screen. She looked at me, then back at the monitor, then back at me again. Her face had gone pale, and for a moment I was certain she was about to say I had cancer. I was prepared for that. I had been bracing myself for bad news for months. What I was not prepared for was what happened next. Dr. Walsh suddenly stood and asked me to follow her, not into the exam room, but into her private office. She shut the door, pulled the blinds closed, and turned to me with an expression I will never forget. It was fear, a doctor who was afraid. She spoke in a low voice. "You need to leave your house today," she said. "Don't tell your husband. Don't change anything about your routine until you are safely gone." Then she turned her computer screen toward me. And what I saw made my blood run hot. My name is Aya Carnes. I am 31 years old. I work as a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm in Portland, Oregon. I have been married for 4 years to Glenn Reeves, a pharmaceutical sales representative. For the past 5 months, I had felt like I was slowly fading away. It began with exhaustion, not normal tiredness, but the kind that makes you forget simple things like your own phone number. Then came the nausea, constant and mild, like seasickness that never passed. My hair started coming out in clumps. I found it on my pillow, in the shower drain, wrapped around my brush. My thinking grew cloudy and disorganized. I could not focus at work. I could not remember conversations from the day before. At 31, I felt closer to 90. Over those 5 months, I saw 3 different doctors. Each gave a different explanation. Stress, anemia, hormonal issues. One suggested I was overworking myself. Another hinted at anxiety. They ran tests, found nothing definitive, and sent me home with supplements and advice to rest more. I blamed turning 30. I did not realize that arsenic poisoning was not part of that milestone. That part came as a different kind of addition, one involving a husband who was deeply disturbed. Glenn went with me to every appointment. He sat in waiting rooms holding my hand, asked detailed questions, and took notes on his phone about my symptoms. Everyone thought he was exceptional. The nurses liked him. One receptionist told me I was fortunate to have such a caring husband. I believed her. I believed all of it. Now I was sitting in Dr. Walsh's office staring at my blood test results, and everything I thought I knew was collapsing. Arsenic. Elevated levels in my bloodstream, not enough to kill me quickly. That was the most disturbing part. The levels matched long-term, low-dose exposure over several months. This was not an attempt to kill me all at once. Someone was making me sick slowly, deliberately, and carefully, letting it resemble an unexplained illness that doctors could not easily diagnose. Dr. Walsh asked questions in the same quiet tone. Who prepares your meals? Does anyone have regular access to your drinks? Is there anyone who might want to hurt you? And then it hit me all at once, like the ground giving way. Glenn makes me a protein smoothie every morning. He started 5 months ago, exactly when my symptoms began. He said he was concerned about my nutrition, that I was not eating enough, that the smoothie would help my energy. It tasted terrible, like blended grass with good intentions. I assumed that was normal for health food. I drank it every day because my husband made it for me. Except it was not care. It was arsenic. Dr. Walsh explained her suspicion. Glenn works in pharmaceutical sales. He understands chemistry, dosages, and how the body processes substances. He would not need to look up how to poison someone. He already knew. The amounts in my system were measured precisely. Enough to keep me ill, not enough to cause immediate alarm. He wanted my death to appear natural. A young wife declining from an unknown condition, a grieving husband left behind. I thought about all the appointments, Glenn sitting beside me, holding my hand, displaying concern for every doctor and nurse. He was not supporting me through illness. He was building an alibi, shaping the image of a devoted husband who had done everything possible to save his wife. Dr. Walsh gave me direct instructions. Do not change your behavior. Do not let him know you suspect anything. Do not suddenly stop drinking the smoothies. He would notice. Contact the police immediately. She gave me her personal email address because she feared Glenn might have access to our shared accounts. I left the clinic on legs that felt unsteady and unfamiliar. My phone buzzed in my purse. A message from Glenn. How did the appointment go, honey? I made your favorite dinner. Lasagna. Can't wait to see you. I stared at that message for a full minute. This man, the man I married 4 years ago, the man I built a life with, slept beside, and trusted completely, was waiting for me at home with dinner, with a smile, with another smoothie planned for the next morning. I had to go back. I had to sit across from him at the table and eat his lasagna. I had to kiss him goodnight and let him hold me. I had to act as if everything was normal, while my husband was slowly, deliberately, and carefully trying to end my life. I texted back, "On my way. Can't wait to see you too." Then I got into my car and screamed until my throat burned. Before we continue, please subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every comment, and I appreciate it more than you realize. That evening, I walked through my front door with a smile on my face and survival on my mind. Not his death, mine. But I had to play the most important role of my life. Glenn was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. He turned and smiled at me, that familiar warm expression I felt for years ago. He asked about my appointment, his voice filled with concern. I told him the doctor found mild anemia, nothing serious, just some new supplements. He nodded thoughtfully and said he'd already researched the best options for me. Always attentive, always involved. I felt sick. Instead of reacting, I thanked him and went to change my clothes. The smoothie issue was my first real test. I couldn't suddenly stop drinking them. Glenn made them every morning and watched me take the first few sips before leaving for work. If I refused, he'd know something was wrong. So I created an explanation. I told him my new medication couldn't be taken with protein and that I needed to wait at least 2 hours after eating. He accepted it without question. Now he leaves the smoothie in the fridge for later, and once he's gone, most of it ends up in the sink. I still drink small amounts, just enough that my recovery looks gradual, not sudden. I tell him the supplements are helping a little. He seems satisfied, which is unsettling. He expected slow decline, so slow improvement doesn't worry him. He's patient. He believes he has time. At home, I became an actress. I wear minimal makeup to look tired and pale. I complain about exhaustion even when I feel stronger. I take naps when Glenn is around, lying awake in bed, pretending to sleep while my thoughts race through plans and precautions. He brings me tea, adjusts my pillows, and tells me to rest. The performance is convincing. He deserves recognition or incarceration. He was heading toward one of them. As the days passed, I began to understand how long this had been developing. About 2 years earlier, I had handed over control of our finances to Glenn. He suggested it gently. I worked long hours, he said. I deserved to come home and relax, not deal with bills or accounts. He offered to manage everything. I thought it was care. It was control. My friendships had faded too, and only then did I see the pattern. Glenn never directly stopped me from seeing anyone. He just reacted each time I mentioned plans with my best friend. "Nah. She's so negative," he'd say. "I just want you around people who support you." He repeated this until I stopped making plans altogether. Slow isolation. Very effective. No obvious proof. One evening while Glenn was at work, I went through the files in our home office. As an accountant, I know where to look and how to read between the lines. It took 20 minutes to find what I had overlooked for 2 years. A life insurance policy on me worth $750,000. Glenn was the only beneficiary. It had been taken out 10 months earlier, 4 months before the poisoning began. This wasn't impulse. This wasn't a breaking point. It was a plan built over nearly a year. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the folder. I kept searching. I found transfers to a separate bank account I didn't know existed. $40,000 over 8 months, hidden under labels like professional development and business expenses. Most people would never notice. But I've audited companies that went to greater lengths to conceal money. Once, I uncovered $2 million hidden as office supplies. Glenn's plan was obvious once I started looking at it closely, like something large trying badly to stay hidden. Then I decided to follow him. One evening, he told me he was meeting a client for dinner. There was something off in his voice, a hint of excitement he didn't fully conceal. I waited 10 minutes after he left, then got into my car and followed him downtown. He parked outside a restaurant I had never been to. From the window, I watched him meet a woman. She was younger than me, probably in her late 20s, with dark hair and expensive jewelry I had never seen Glenn buy. They were clearly close. She touched his arm often. He leaned in to whisper things that made her smile. This was not a business dinner. Still, something felt strange. The woman, later I learned her name was Simone Hafford, didn't look happy. Even when she smiled, her shoulders were tense. She kept checking her phone, distracted and uneasy. Glenn was charming as always, but she didn't have the ease of someone in love. I noted it and moved on. It didn't fit yet, but it felt important. Around the same time, I noticed something else. Glenn's mother, Renata, had suddenly become very involved. She stopped by almost daily to check on me, brought homemade soup, and sat with me while I rested. This was unusual because she had never liked me. At our wedding, she told Glenn's aunt that I wasn't right for her son. For 3 years, she treated me like an outsider. Now she was suddenly attentive to my health. It didn't add up. Then I overheard Glenn on the phone with her. "Thanks for checking on her today, Mom," he said. "I worry when I'm at work." He had asked his own mother to watch me. Renata thought she was helping her concerned son care for his sick wife. She didn't know she was part of a monitoring system. Glenn was using everyone, including his mother's guilt over how she'd treated me before. Now that I was supposedly dying, she wanted to make amends, and Glenn was taking full advantage of that. I had pieces of the picture now. A husband poisoning me for insurance money, a hidden bank account, a woman who seemed involved but unhappy, and a mother-in-law unknowingly acting as a lookout. Still, something didn't fit. Why was Simone so tense? And what else was Glenn hiding? I knew there was something larger I hadn't seen yet. I was right. Through Dr. Walsh, I contacted Detective Maria Reyes, who specialized in domestic crimes. She had handled cases like mine before. We met at a coffee shop across the city, far from anywhere Glenn might notice us. Detective Reyes was calm and straightforward. She believed me immediately, which felt like relief after months of doubt. She explained what we needed: physical proof of the poison, evidence of who was giving it to me, financial records showing motive, and ideally a recording that directly connected Glenn to the crime. Oregon is a one-party consent state, she told me, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was part of without informing the other person. My first step was proving the poison itself. Instead of dumping one of Glenn's smoothies, I saved it in a container Renata had brought me and sent it to a private lab Detective Reyes recommended. The results came back within a week. Arsenic compounds, in low but steady amounts, matching exactly what was found in my blood. Now I had confirmation of what was making me sick. What I still needed was proof of who was supplying it and how. Glenn worked in pharmaceuticals, but arsenic wasn't a drug. His company records showed nothing unusual, something Detective Reyes had already checked. So where was he getting it? I thought again about Simone. After following Glenn that night, I had looked into her. Her name was Simone Hafford, and according to LinkedIn, she worked at Pacific Northwest Industrial Supply. The company sold industrial chemicals, including arsenic compounds used in wood treatment and glass production. But Simone worked in accounts, not inventory. She didn't handle chemicals directly. How could Glenn be getting arsenic through her? My father was also an accountant. He taught me everything I know. He used to say, "Documentation is protection. Keep records of everything." I thought he was overly cautious when I was younger. It turns out he was preparing me for something like this. Against Detective Rise's advice, I made a decision. I needed to speak to Simone myself. I found her at a cafe during her lunch break, sitting alone at a corner table. When I approached, her expression hardened immediately. She knew who I was. Glenn must have shown her pictures, likely warning her about his unstable wife. "You're the wife," she said flatly. "I have nothing to say to you." I sat down anyway and showed her the lab results confirming arsenic in my blood. She dismissed it. "Glenn told me you'd try this," she said. "He said you're manipulative and unstable." Then I showed her the life insurance policy. $750,000. Glenn listed as the only beneficiary. She paused for a second, then recovered. "He's just being responsible," she said. "Planning ahead. He loves you. He talks all the time about how worried he is." She had been prepared for this conversation. Glenn had trained her for it in advance. She had already been warned that I might approach her with false claims, so I needed another angle. I asked her a single question. "Did Glenn ask you to get life insurance as well?" Her face lost color immediately. How did you know that? Let me guess, I said. Around $500,000. He told you it was for your future together, for when you'd finally be a real couple. He framed it as something romantic, a promise of commitment. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. I leaned in and told her plainly, Simone, I'm not a jealous wife clinging to a failing marriage. I'm Glenn's current victim, and you're next. That was the moment everything shifted. Simone began telling me her story. She met Glenn 14 months earlier at a professional conference. He was attentive, confident, and said all the right things. He told her his marriage was a mistake, that I was distant and unloving, that he felt trapped and was waiting for the right moment to leave. She believed him because she wanted to. 8 months ago, he convinced her to take out a life insurance policy worth $500,000. He said it was for their shared future, so they'd be secure once they were together openly. She thought it was a sign of seriousness. She was 28, in love, listening to promises about the life they would build. She signed without hesitation. Around that same period, Glenn asked her for a small favor. He said he needed to order specialty materials for work, but his company's supplier charged too much. Simone's company offered better pricing. Could she let him use her ordering account to save money? She gave him her login details without thinking twice. She never checked what was ordered. She never saw any deliveries. As I watched her, the realization settled in. Glenn had used her account to purchase the arsenic that had been poisoning me. If anyone traced the purchase, it would point to Simone, not him. She was his shield. And once I was dead and he collected the $750,000, she would follow. Another tragic death, another payout, the same grieving man left behind. 2 women, 2 policies, $1.25 million. Simone began to shake. I thought he loved me, she said quietly. I gave up everything for him. I've been waiting for over a year. I told her I knew. That's how he operates. He makes you feel chosen while planning your end. She looked at me then, truly looked at me, and the hostility disappeared. We were 2 women caught in the same deception, sold the same story by the same man, both meant to die. What do we do? She asked. That was when my old friend Nina reappeared. She had sensed something was wrong and couldn't stay away. She reached out the same week I met Simone. When I told her everything, she wasn't surprised. I always thought Glenn's smile looked rehearsed, Nina said. Too polished, like a shark in a polo shirt. I asked why she never said anything before. She told me that warning someone in love about their partner is pointless. They have to see it themselves. I couldn't argue with that. Simone agreed to cooperate with Detective Reyes. She provided access logs and order histories showing purchases she never approved. The arsenic compound had been shipped to a post office box Glenn rented under another name, believing that was enough to protect him. It wasn't. Now there was a clear source for the poison. The financial motive was documented down to exact amounts. There were 2 witnesses ready to testify. Still, Detective Reyes wanted one more element to make the case airtight. Glenn himself connecting all the pieces. I already knew how to get that. I just had to stay close to the man trying to kill me. Detective Reyes organized the next stage carefully. Simone handed over her company's records, and there it was, an order for arsenic trioxide placed 6 months earlier. The delivery location was a P.O. box rented under the name Gerald Richards. A false name, but security cameras at the postal facility told the truth. Footage showed Glenn collecting packages from that box on 3 different occasions. His face was unmistakable. He thought he'd covered everything. He hadn't. Simone became our inside contact. She continued seeing Glenn as if nothing had changed, meeting him for dinners and listening to his promises. The difference was that she recorded every interaction. Oregon's one-party consent law meant everything he said could be used in court. The recordings were disturbing in their normal tone. Glenn talked about their future, about the money he'd been saving, about starting over once my situation resolved itself. One night, he told her that once my health declined further, they could stop hiding. It was tragic, he said, but I wouldn't suffer much longer. He spoke as if he were describing an unavoidable event, something natural, not something he caused every day. At home, I maintained the act. I looked weaker than I felt, moved slower than necessary, thanked Glenn for his constant care. One night, I told him I didn't know what I'd do without him. The words tasted like the poison he'd been giving me, but I said them. He kissed my forehead and told me to rest. The hardest part was Renata. Glenn's mother kept visiting daily, bringing soup and concern in equal amounts. She sat beside me while I pretended to sleep, sometimes holding my hand. I could feel her regret for the years she'd treated me coldly. She was trying to fix things before it was too late. She didn't know there was nothing for her to fix. Her distance hadn't been the problem. Her son was. I wanted to tell her the truth, but Detective Reyes advised against it. Renata loved Glenn without question. If she knew, she might confront him, warn him, or give him time to erase evidence or disappear. I had to let her believe the story a little longer. If this story has kept your attention so far, take a moment to hit the like button. Your support truly matters. Now let's finish this. Detective Reyes needed one final piece of evidence, something that came directly from Glenn, not filtered through Simone. She asked if I was willing to wear a wire and have a carefully planned conversation with my husband. The goal wasn't a confession. Glenn was too calculated for that. What she needed was proof that he knew about the insurance policy and that he was comfortable discussing the idea of my death. Combined with the rest of the evidence, it would complete the case. I agreed without hesitation. Nina came over that morning to help me prepare. She assisted in positioning the recording device, a tiny unit that was barely noticeable, and coached me on staying calm. I knew enough from crime shows not to fidget, touch the device, or act strangely. Be normal. Forget it's there. I decided to focus on tax returns instead. Surprisingly effective. That evening, Glenn came home to find me looking noticeably weaker. I leaned into the pale makeup and slow movements. I told him I'd been thinking about the future, about what might happen if my health didn't improve. Glenn, I said, if something happens to me, I want to know you'll be taken care of. His expression shifted instantly into concern. Don't talk like that, he said. You're going to get better. But just in case, I continued, the life insurance, our savings, I want you to have everything. I want to know you'll be okay. He took my hand and squeezed it gently. Let's not focus on dark possibilities, he said. But he didn't reject the idea. He didn't insist he couldn't imagine life without me. He simply redirected and waited. I mentioned the policy directly. I'm glad we have that protection, I said. $750,000. Enough for you to start over, to build a new life. He nodded slowly. I'll take care of everything, he said. I always do. It wasn't an admission, but it wasn't denial either. Someone innocent would have pushed back, would have insisted I was going to survive. Glenn accepted my death as if it were already settled. Later that night, while I pretended to sleep, Glenn made a phone call in the hallway. He thought I couldn't hear. He didn't know the recorder was still running. He called Simone. She's getting worse, he said quietly, with a note of anticipation. Probably a few more weeks at most. Then we're finally free. He sounded relieved, almost excited, like someone looking forward to a trip. That was the moment everything inside me shifted, not into pieces but into clarity. Cold, steady, absolute clarity. This man had never loved me. I had been a target from the start. The wedding, the vows, 4 years of what I thought was a marriage, it was all preparation for a payout. Detective Reyes called the next morning. The arrest warrant had been signed. Glenn Reeves would be taken into custody the following day. 8 weeks of investigation. 14 months of manipulation. 4 years of a marriage that had never been real. One more night. I just had to get through one more night. One more dinner. One more smoothie I wouldn't drink. One more kiss from a man counting down the days until I died. I made it through. Barely. The morning of Glenn's arrest began like any other. I woke before he did, made coffee, and moved quietly through the kitchen. He came downstairs around 7, showered and dressed for work, wearing the cologne I once loved. He kissed me goodbye the same way he always had. Rest today, honey, he said. I'll bring home dinner tonight. I smiled and told him to have a good day. He left. 20 minutes later, he returned, escorted by Detective Reyes and 2 uniformed officers. There was no spectacle, no shouting, no struggle, no scene for the neighbors. Just law enforcement at my door with a badge and a warrant, and my husband's face shifting from confusion to calculation to something flat and empty. Glenn Reeves, Detective Reyes, said, You are under arrest for attempted first-degree murder and insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent." Glenn looked at me. I stood in the kitchen doorway holding my coffee. For the first time in 4 years, I saw his real face. No warmth, no affection. Just a stranger doing mental math, trying to locate the flaw in his plan. "This is a mistake," he said evenly. "My wife is confused. She's been very ill, still acting." Detective Reyes didn't react. "We have lab analysis of the poison, financial records, witness statements, and recorded conversations. You can save the act for your attorney." Something flickered briefly in Glenn's eyes, then disappeared. "I want my lawyer," he said. "That's your right." They handcuffed him in our living room, read him his rights, and walked him to the unmarked car in the driveway. He never looked back at me. Not once. I stood at the window and watched them drive away. The man I married. The man I trusted. The man who held me while I cried about an illness he caused. Gone down our quiet street in the back of a police car. I expected to feel victory or satisfaction. Instead, I felt exhausted and free. At the station, Glenn's high-priced attorney arrived within the hour. Glenn immediately moved to his backup plan. Blame Simone. He told detectives she must have poisoned me. She was obsessed. She wanted me gone. He claimed he had no idea what she was doing. It was a reasonable strategy. Simone had access to chemicals. Simone had motive. She wanted Glenn. If Glenn hadn't been so confident in his own intelligence, it might have worked. But he didn't know Simone had been cooperating with police for 3 weeks. He didn't know about the recordings where he spoke openly about my death. And he didn't know about the security footage showing him collecting arsenic shipments from a P.O. box he believed couldn't be traced. Detective Reyes played the recordings for Glenn, his own voice, calm and precise, telling Simone that I likely had only a few weeks left, his voice eager, discussing how they'd finally be free. That's when his face changed. That's when he realized the trap had closed. He tried to shift the blame to Simone. Later, I told Na about it, and she laughed bitterly. Guess he didn't get the memo. His backup plan had switched sides. Turns out women communicate. Revolutionary idea. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Laboratory analysis confirmed arsenic in the smoothies. Orders were traced to Simone's work account using credentials only Glenn controlled. Security footage showed him collecting the shipments. The life insurance policy had been taken out 4 months before the poisoning began. $40,000 moved to a secret account. Recorded conversations revealed his anticipation of my death. Phone records showed searches for chronic arsenic symptoms, life insurance timelines, and undetectable poisons, all on our shared home computer. Criminal mastermind, indeed. Glenn's lawyer advised a plea deal. There was no defense. The trial would be a formality. Simone's situation was resolved more quickly. The district attorney recognized she had been manipulated. She didn't know Glenn was using her account for poison. She didn't know she was next. She cooperated fully, providing crucial testimony and building the case that would put Glenn away. She accepted a deal: probation, mandatory counseling, no jail time. She'd lost her job, her reputation, her future, but she kept her freedom. She sent me a simple message through Detective Reyes. "Thank you for telling me the truth." I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. We weren't friends, and likely never would be, but we understood each other in a way no one else could. Telling Renata was harder. Detective Reyes delivered the news officially, but I called afterward. Maybe I owed her that much. Maybe I needed her to hear it from me. At first, she refused to believe it. Glenn would never. This couldn't be real. Then the silence. Then tears. "I was in your house," she said. "I watched you suffer. I brought you soup while my own son poisoned you." I didn't know what to say, and neither did she. Renata wasn't charged. She genuinely hadn't known. She was just another person Glenn manipulated, using her love and guilt as a weapon without her knowledge. We were both women who loved a man who never existed. I told her, she hung up, and I haven't heard from her since. I don't blame her. Glenn initially refused a plea deal, too proud to admit defeat. Once his lawyer reviewed the evidence, reality set in. There was no winning, only minimizing the damage. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for 2, walking the jury through 5 months of poisoning, 4 years of manipulation, and the moment a doctor's trembling hands changed everything. I looked at Glenn, searching for any trace of the man I married. He wasn't there. Maybe he never had been. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, Glenn's face was empty. Guilty of attempted first-degree murder. Guilty of insurance fraud. Guilty of domestic abuse. 15 years in state prison, eligible for parole at 46 at the earliest. His pharmaceutical license revoked. All assets frozen pending my civil suit. The man who calculated everything to the milligram hadn't planned for this. Simone completed probation and moved to California, leaving me a forwarding address in case I ever needed anything. I tucked it away, never looked at it again. Surviving the same storm didn't make us friends. Renata sold her house to pay debts. Glenn had promised to help her with $60,000, but things ended differently. Last I heard, she moved in with her sister in Arizona. No letters exchanged, some silent everything. My recovery took 3 months. Arsenic cleared from my system, my hair grew back, the fog lifted. I remembered who I was before Glenn, before the manipulation, before isolation, before asking permission to see friends. I filed for divorce while Glenn awaited trial. Got back what he hadn't already taken. Sold the house. Every room held memories that were actually lies. I couldn't stay there. I moved to Seattle. New city, new job, a kitchen where I control what I eat. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit. Simple, complete control. Something profound in feeding yourself, trusting what goes in your body. I'll never take that for granted. Nah, and I have dinner every Thursday. She never said, "I told you so," even though she could have. True friends don't need to. They just show up. Glenn writes from prison sometimes. I recognize his handwriting, neat and careful, the same I once found attractive. I've never opened a single letter. I don't care if he apologizes, explains, manipulates, or threatens. Chapters close permanently for a reason. I once wondered if I missed warning signs, if I was naive for trusting him. I've made peace. Glenn was skilled. He knew how to become whatever his victim needed. My only mistake, believing love could look like control, devotion feel like suffocation. I survived because I'm stubborn and precise, trained to read fine print. My father was right. Documentation is protection. Sometimes the most dangerous person in your life shares your bed. Sometimes the strongest person in the room is underestimated. Glenn underestimated me. That was his real mistake. Now, I wake early, drink coffee by the window, watching Seattle awaken. I work, return to an empty apartment filled with possibility, not emptiness. I call now when lonely, see a therapist twice a month, relearn to trust myself. Someone asked if I'll ever marry again. I said maybe, maybe not. The future is open, the way it hasn't been since I was 25. I'm in no rush to fill it with anything but peace. Remember, the most dangerous person in the room is often the one who reads the fine print. Thank you for watching. More gripping stories are on your screen. Click one now. You won't want to miss it. See you in the next story.